Ava sat at her desk, a steaming cup of coffee in front of her, as the sun began to set outside the large windows of her office. She adjusted her glasses, flipping through the pages of her patient files. The familiar hum of the city beyond her office was comforting. It was an ordinary Wednesday evening, yet something felt different today. Her mind lingered on the new patient scheduled for the evening, a man named Leo Harlow. A name she hadn't heard before, but his case file was already thick with complications. Ava, with her years of experience, had dealt with her fair share of troubled individuals. But Leo's history was unsettling. Diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, among other things. His file included disturbing notes from previous therapists, a history of erratic behavior, extreme dependency, and unsettling patterns of attachment to his caregivers. What made his case particularly alarming was his escalating obsession with the idea of control, and with those he became attached to. When the door to her office creaked open, Ava looked up, startled from her thoughts. A tall man stepped inside, his presence immediately filling the room. His features were sharp, almost unnervingly perfect, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. He had the sort of face that could belong to a movie star, handsome, but in a way that made her uneasy. There was something in his gaze that held her attention longer than she expected. "Dr. Ava Lawson?" His voice was calm, low, with an undercurrent of something she couldn't place, almost like a challenge. "That's me," she replied, standing and offering her hand. "Please, have a seat, Mr. Harlow." He nodded, his expression unreadable, and took the chair opposite her. As he settled in, Ava couldn't help but notice the way he seemed to study her every move, the subtle tension in his posture. She felt a slight shiver run down her spine, but quickly pushed it aside. She had dealt with many patients before, and she would manage this one as well. "I've read your file," she began, opening her notebook. "I understand you've been struggling with some very difficult emotions and behaviors. What brings you in today?" Leo's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I've been told I'm difficult to understand. I need someone who won't judge me. Someone who can see beyond what others see." Ava nodded slowly. This wasn't an uncommon request, though the way he said it made it sound more like a demand than a plea. She adjusted her glasses, taking a more clinical tone. "I'm here to listen. But let's start with the basics. Tell me what's been troubling you lately." His gaze never left hers as he spoke, his words deliberate. "It's hard to explain, but maybe you can help me understand why I feel so drawn to certain people." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't put her finger on why, but the intensity of his words felt too personal. She quickly masked her unease with a professional smile. "I see," she said, keeping her voice steady. "It sounds like we need to dig deeper into these feelings. Let's explore that." As the session began, Ava felt an odd connection to Leo, one that tugged at her curiosity in ways she wasn't used to. There was something unsettling about him, but she couldn't ignore the allure. She knew she had to stay objective, but something deep inside her whispered that this would be a different kind of patient. The door closed behind him when the session ended, but Ava's mind lingered on the strange encounter. What had just happened? The following week, Ava sat at her desk, reviewing her notes from Leo's last session. Her office was quieter today, with only the soft ticking of the clock in the background. She couldn't shake the feeling that something about Leo was different from the other patients she'd seen over the years. His file was intimidating enough, but it was the way he looked at her, the way he spoke, that had lingered in her thoughts long after he left. When Leo entered her office, it felt like the air shifted. He was impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his hair slightly tousled as if he hadn't cared much for how it looked. Despite his outward calm, Ava noticed his eyes immediately scanning the room, taking in every detail, as though he were already reading her. "Good afternoon, Dr. Lawson," he said, his voice smooth and even. He took his usual seat, sitting slightly forward, as though ready for whatever the session would bring. "Afternoon, Mr. Harlow." Ava responded, forcing herself to focus. How are you feeling today? Leo paused, and for a moment, Ava thought he wasn't going to answer. His eyes fixed on her, almost too intensely, before he spoke again. I'm curious about how people like you, people in your profession, think. What makes you tick, I suppose. Ava raised an eyebrow, maintaining her composure. It's my job to understand people, Mr. Harlow. I don't expect you to think like me. What I do expect, however, is for you to share what's been on your mind since our last session. He nodded, but there was a darkness in his smile that made her uncomfortable. You know, I've been thinking a lot about control. Not just of my own life, but of the people around me. How it's so easy to manipulate those who are vulnerable. To make them want what you want. To bend them to your will. Isn't that a fascinating thought? Ava's pulse quickened at his words. She kept her expression neutral, but internally, a red flag went up. This was not the kind of conversation she was expecting. She could feel the unease beginning to stir within her, but she couldn't show it. Her role was to help him, not to be intimidated by him. I can see how you might feel that way, she said slowly, trying to keep her tone professional. But manipulation is unhealthy. It's not the kind of control that leads to true healing or understanding. Leo's smile widened slightly, but there was no humor in it. I'm not talking about healing, Dr. Lawson. I'm talking about power. The kind of power that comes when you know someone's weaknesses, their desires, when you can make them feel things they never thought possible. Ava shifted in her chair, maintaining a calm exterior but feeling a growing sense of discomfort. She could feel his eyes on her, measuring, watching for any sign of vulnerability. She wondered if this was part of the therapy, if he was testing her boundaries, or seeing how far he could push. She had read about patients like him before, but nothing had prepared her for the intensity of their interactions. I don't believe in using power in that way, Ava replied, her voice steady. True connections are built on trust and respect, not on manipulation. Leo tilted his head, as if intrigued by her response. I admire your conviction, he said, his gaze lingering. But there's something fascinating about the idea of pushing limits. Don't you think? Ava tried to focus on the patient in front of her, but she was beginning to feel something she hadn't expected, an undeniable pull. His presence was overwhelming, and for the first time in a long while, she found herself questioning her own professional distance. You seem to be fascinated by control, she said, returning to her notes. Perhaps we should focus on why you feel this need. Where do you think this obsession comes from? Leo leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. It's simple. People are weak. They give in to desires, to weaknesses. And if you know how to exploit those weaknesses, you can have everything you want. His words hung in the air, thick with tension. Ava's heart skipped a beat, but she remained composed. She had dealt with difficult patients before, but there was something about Leo that made her feel off balance. It was as though he was playing a game with her, one that she wasn't sure she wanted to play. I think we should dig deeper into your past, she said, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. Understanding the root of your feelings might help us understand why you view things this way. Leo's eyes gleamed as he nodded. Perhaps you're right, but Dr. Lawson, you might find that this isn't a simple matter. Some things can't be fixed. Some things are just too far gone. The session ended, but as Leo stood to leave, Ava felt the weight of his gaze one last time. The room felt different now, charged. She watched him walk out, her mind racing. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of sessions with Leo. Each meeting left Ava with an unsettling sense of unease, but it was also impossible to deny the growing intrigue. Leo's words, his behavior, everything about him seemed designed to test her limits. He was unpredictable, like a storm gathering on the horizon. And yet, Ava found herself eagerly awaiting their sessions. Leo seemed to have an uncanny ability to probe into the most personal corners of her life. He asked questions about her childhood, her relationships, and her career with a persistence that made her uneasy. He never seemed satisfied with the surface-level answers, always pushing for more, trying to find cracks in her professional exterior. "You're hiding something, aren't you, Dr. Lawson?" Leo's voice broke through her thoughts one afternoon as she tried to keep her focus. "Everyone has secrets. Even you." Ava hesitated, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't wrong. She had her own secrets, things she'd never told anyone, even her closest friends. But this was supposed to be about him, not her. Yet the question hung in the air, pressing in on her. "Everyone has their own boundaries," Ava said carefully, maintaining her professionalism. "My job is to help you explore yours, not to share mine." Leo smiled, a glint of something dark in his eyes. "I understand. But boundaries are meant to be tested, aren't they? To see how far you can go before you break." The statement sent a chill down her spine, but Ava quickly regained her composure. "We all have limits, Leo. It's important to recognize them and learn to respect them." He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "But what if the limits are artificial? What if you could push past them? Go further than you ever thought possible?" Ava didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached for her notes, trying to focus on the task at hand. "I think we need to focus on your feelings of control. You've expressed a need to dominate situations. Where do you think that comes from?" For a moment, Leo was silent. His gaze softened, and he seemed almost contemplative. "I suppose it comes from a lack of control in my past. I never felt in charge of anything, my family, my life, my desires. But now, I want that power. I want to feel like I can shape everything around me." Ava scribbled some notes, her mind racing. This was familiar territory. People often sought control when they felt powerless. But there was something about Leo that made her question whether his need for control was more than just a symptom of his past. "Tell me about your childhood," Ava asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. "What was your family like?" Leo's face darkened, and Ava could see the walls closing in on him. He looked away, his jaw tightening, before he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "My father was a cold man. He expected perfection. Nothing I did was ever enough. And my mother, she was always distant. She never really understood me. I had to fight for everything I wanted." The vulnerability in his voice surprised Ava. It was rare for patients like Leo to reveal anything so personal, especially without manipulation or ulterior motives. But even as he spoke, Ava felt something stir in her, an emotion she wasn't sure she wanted to confront. "Do you think that's why you're drawn to power?" Ava asked gently. "Because it gives you control over something that you never had growing up?" Leo met her gaze again, and for a brief moment, Ava saw a flicker of something human behind the cold, calculated persona he had been presenting. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But power isn't enough. I need more. I need to feel everything." Ava frowned, sensing the danger in his words. "What do you mean by that, Leo?" He leaned in closer, his eyes locking onto hers with a startling intensity. "I need to feel connected. To someone. To you, maybe." Ava recoiled slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise with a calm expression. "That's not something we can explore in this setting, Leo. Our relationship is professional. That's the only way this can work." For a moment, there was a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes, an almost predatory gleam that sent a shiver down Ava's spine. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by the mask of the patient she had come to know. "I understand," Leo said, his tone flat. "But Dr. Lawson, don't think I don't see you. Don't think I can't sense the pull between us. It's there." The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating the room with an undeniable tension. Ava fought the urge to respond, to defend herself. Instead, She focused on her breathing, keeping her professional distance intact. As the session ended, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that she had just crossed an invisible line. Leo's presence was all-consuming, and though she knew she had to remain detached, she couldn't ignore the growing fascination she felt for him. But what was it about him that kept drawing her in? And how much longer could she stay immune to the dangerous allure he wielded? By the fourth session, Ava found herself caught in a delicate web she had unwittingly allowed Leo to weave around her. Every moment in his presence felt like a paradox. She was both drawn to him and repelled by him. Each word he spoke, each glance he cast her way, stirred a conflict deep within her. She was a professional, a psychologist with years of experience, yet Leo had somehow unraveled her sense of control. She sat in her office, staring at the clock. The session was about to begin, and for the first time, Ava felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with dread. What would he say today? What would he reveal? And, more troubling still, what part of her was willing to listen? The door opened, and Leo entered. He seemed different today, less restrained, more intense. His eyes locked with hers immediately, a smoldering look that sent a shiver down her spine. He was always intense, but today, there was something darker in him. "Dr. Lawson," he greeted, his voice low, almost too soft. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about last time." Ava nodded, trying to steady her breath. "I'm glad you're reflecting, Leo. It's important to process those thoughts." Leo took a seat, but this time he didn't lean forward like usual. Instead, he remained back, his posture relaxed but his gaze unwavering. "I've been thinking about control, about boundaries, and well, I've been thinking about you." Ava froze for a split second. She could feel her pulse quicken, but she quickly regained her composure. She had to keep this professional. She had to. "What about me, Leo?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. He leaned forward slightly, a sly smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I think you understand me more than you let on. I think you're intrigued by me. You don't just want to fix me, Dr. Lawson. You want to understand why I do the things I do. You want to know why I think the way I do." Ava's stomach tightened at the precision of his words. He was right, but admitting that to him, admitting it to herself, was another thing entirely. "I'm here to help you, Leo. That's the focus of our sessions," she said, her voice cold, but it didn't have the usual conviction. Leo studied her, as if weighing her response. "I'm not sure help is what I need anymore. Maybe what I need is to show you what it means to truly live." His eyes darkened. "To really feel. To give in to desire." Ava's breath hitched. She had been trained to handle difficult situations, to keep patients like Leo in check. But this felt different. He was crossing boundaries, testing her resolve in a way she had never anticipated. Her heart raced as she tried to control her reaction. "We can't go down that path, Leo," Ava said, her voice a little less firm now. "This is a professional setting. You have to understand that." Leo's smile widened, a knowing look in his eyes. "I think you're lying, Dr. Lawson. I think you've already gone down that path. You just don't want to admit it." Ava's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, as though he were peering into her soul. It was as if he knew everything, her every fear, every desire, and he was using that to push her further into a corner. "I'm not lying," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're wrong." But even as the words left her mouth, Ava wasn't sure she believed them. Was she lying to him? Or was she lying to herself? Leo stood up suddenly, his movements fluid, predatory. "You don't have to deny it, Dr. Lawson. I see the way you look at me, the way you listen when I speak. You're already intrigued, and deep down you want to know what it would be like." Ava's heart pounded in her chest. She stood quickly, taking a step back. "This session is over, Leo. I won't tolerate this kind of behavior in my office." For the first time, Leo didn't respond with a witty remark or a smug smile. Instead, his expression shifted, a faint flicker of disappointment crossing his face. "You think you can control me, don't you? But you can't, Dr. Lawson. No one can." Ava didn't know what to say. He was right, in a way. She had been trying to control the situation, to keep things professional. But Leo had a way of turning her world upside down, making her question everything she thought she knew. He turned toward the door, pausing for just a moment. "I'll see you next week, Dr. Lawson. And next time, I think we'll take things to a whole new level." Ava didn't say anything as he left. The silence in the room was deafening. Her hands shook as she grabbed her notepad, trying to steady herself, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Leo was playing a dangerous game. But the worst part was, Ava didn't know if she was willing to stop playing. The following week was a blur for Ava. The moment Leo had left her office, she had felt a sense of relief. But it was fleeting. The intensity of their exchange lingered in the air, like a heavy fog that refused to lift. No matter how many times she tried to push it out of her mind, his words echoed in her thoughts. "Next time, I think we'll take things to a whole new level." She had spent the days that followed trying to convince herself that she had done the right thing by setting boundaries. But there was a nagging feeling in her gut that told her it wasn't over. It couldn't be. Ava walked into her office on Monday morning, determined to focus on her other patients, to push Leo out of her mind. But when the clock hit 10 and she saw him walk through the door, all her efforts seemed futile. "Dr. Lawson," Leo said softly, his voice smooth and calm, as though nothing had happened between them. His dark eyes never left hers. "It's good to see you again." Ava forced a smile, trying to maintain her professionalism. "Leo, I thought we agreed that we needed to keep things professional." He didn't respond immediately, instead choosing to sit slowly, as if savoring every moment. The way he moved, the way he looked at her, it was as though he were savoring his power over her. The unspoken tension between them had only grown since their last meeting, and Ava couldn't ignore it any longer. "I understand," Leo said, his voice almost mocking. "But I think there's more to us than just professionalism, don't you?" He leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "I know you felt it too, that connection." Ava felt a flutter in her chest, a sharp reminder of how close they had come to crossing the line the last time. She wanted to look away, to retreat into the safety of her own control, but something inside her resisted. "Leo," she started, her voice shaky. "We can't keep doing this. It's not healthy. It's not professional." Leo's lips curled into a small smile, but there was something dark and almost predatory behind it. "You're right," he said, his voice lowering. "It's not healthy. But that's what makes it so exciting, isn't it? The danger, the unpredictability." Ava's stomach turned. She could feel her resolve weakening, her ability to control the situation slipping further away with each word he spoke. "I don't want to be a part of whatever this is," Ava said firmly, trying to hold on to the last thread of her professionalism. "I'm here to help you, Leo. I can't help you if we keep going down this path." Leo's smile faded, replaced by an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "You're already a part of it, Dr. Lawson," he said quietly. "Whether you want to admit it or not, you can't escape it." He stood up abruptly, closing the distance between them. His presence was overpowering, suffocating. Ava found herself backing away instinctively, but Leo was too close, and she knew that trying to retreat now would only make it worse. "I don't want this to end," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "I want to see how far we can go." Ava's heart raced, her thoughts spinning. She wanted to push him away, to scream at him to stop, but she couldn't move. Her body felt frozen, paralyzed by the overwhelming mixture of fear and desire. For a brief moment, she wondered what would happen if she just let go, if she didn't fight it. But that thought was fleeting, and she shoved it aside, trying to regain control. "Leo, please," she said, her voice barely audible. "You have to go. This isn't what you need. This is dangerous for both of us." Leo paused for a moment, his eyes scanning her face, as though deciding whether to listen to her or not. His gaze softened, and for a brief instant, Ava saw something almost vulnerable in him. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the same dark intensity that had haunted their sessions. "I'll go," Leo said, stepping back. "But remember, Dr. Lawson, the choice isn't entirely yours. There's a point where you stop resisting, and you just let things happen." Ava didn't respond, watching him as he left the office. The door clicked shut behind him, and she was left standing there, her hands trembling. She was breathing hard, but not from fear. There was something else, something that both terrified and thrilled her. She had tried to set boundaries, but Leo had pushed them, tested them, and now she was left questioning herself. How much longer could she keep resisting? Was she really helping him? Or was she just becoming another part of his dangerous game? Her mind raced with these thoughts as she sat back down in her chair, her head spinning. The line between right and wrong had blurred, and Ava wasn't sure how much longer she could stay on the side of reason. The spiral was deepening, and she could feel herself being pulled in. Ava had thought she could walk away. She had told herself that she was strong enough to maintain control, to keep her professional distance. But with each passing day, she felt herself slipping further into the abyss that Leo had opened for her. His words, his presence, they haunted her thoughts, clouded her judgment, and clouded her very sense of self. The sessions grew more intense, more charged with a dangerous kind of tension. Ava tried to keep her composure, to steer the conversations back to the clinical, the rational, but Leo was a master at pushing her buttons. His smile was always there, just beneath the surface, knowing exactly how to manipulate the smallest crack in her resolve. Every time he left, he took a part of her with him, and she was terrified of what that meant. It was late on a Wednesday evening when she found herself pacing her office, her thoughts a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had seen Leo just an hour ago. It was supposed to be another ordinary session, one she had planned to finish quickly, one where she would enforce the boundaries that had been so violently tested before. But Leo had changed the dynamic once again. He had come into the session calm, but his eyes, those deep, piercing eyes, had spoken volumes. And then, he'd said it. "I don't want to play games anymore, Ava," he'd said. "I want something real, something more." His words had struck her like a blow. Something real? What did he mean by that? Was he asking for more of her? More than the fragile therapist-patient relationship that was already teetering on the edge? The temptation to give in, to let him in, was overwhelming, but she knew how dangerous it could be. And yet, something in her couldn't help but wonder. What would it feel like to let go completely? After the session, she had dismissed him as quickly as possible, trying to shake the overwhelming sensation of vulnerability that had crept into her chest. She knew she couldn't afford to lose control, not now, not when everything she had worked for was at stake. But then, as she stood in her office that evening, staring out at the darkened streets of the city, she heard the sound of footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned, and before she could react, the door to her office creaked open, and Leo was standing there, his expression unreadable. Ava froze. "Leo, what are you doing here?" He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence filling the room, overwhelming it. His eyes never left hers, and the heat between them was palpable. He was close now, too close, and she could smell the faint scent of his cologne, a reminder of all the times they had been alone in this very space. "I couldn't stay away," Leo said quietly. His voice was soft, but there was an undeniable edge to it. "I need to understand you, Ava. I can't leave here until I do." Ava took a step back, her breath quickening. "You need to leave," she said, her voice shaking with the mix of fear and frustration that had been building for weeks. "This isn't healthy, Leo. You have to go." Leo's expression darkened. He stepped forward again, closing the distance between them, and for a moment, Ava thought she might collapse from the weight of the emotions crashing over her. "I know what you're afraid of," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're afraid of what will happen if you let go. But I'm not leaving, Ava. Not until you understand that you're as drawn to me as I am to you. And this, whatever it is between us, it's not going to end until we confront it." Ava's mind raced. She could feel her walls crumbling, piece by piece, under the pressure of his words. She wanted to scream at him to leave, to force him out of her life once and for all, but she couldn't find the strength to do it. The temptation to give in, to let herself fall into the abyss, was overwhelming. But at what cost? "Please, Leo," she whispered, the fight in her voice faltering. "Please, just go." But Leo wasn't listening anymore. He took another step forward, his hand reaching out to her. And before she could stop him, his fingers brushed her cheek. The touch was gentle, but it ignited something inside her, something dark and powerful that she couldn't control. And then, as if everything in the universe had collided at that moment, Ava felt herself tilt toward him. She closed her eyes, feeling the pull of his touch, the overwhelming desire to let go and to feel alive again. But just as quickly as the moment had come, she stopped herself. She pushed his hand away, gasping for air as she forced herself to step back, away from him. "I won't let you do this to me," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Leo stood still for a moment, studying her with an unreadable expression, before slowly turning and walking toward the door. "I understand," he said quietly. "But remember, Ava, you can't run from this. Not forever." And with that, he was gone. Ava stood there, her chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. The room felt suffocating, but the storm inside her had only just begun. She knew now. There was no escaping what had started between them, and she wasn't sure if she ever could.